Thank you for joining us today for a meeting on air quality and the Cummins Highway reconstruction. My name is Daniela Sanchez, and I am part of the active transportation team in the transportation department, along with Stephanie.
Hi, my name is Stephanie Saskin. I also am in the transportation department. I'm the active transportation director.
And I have with me Jeff Alexis.
Good evening, everyone. Jeffrey Alexis with the Public Works Department Engineering Division. I'm also currently working as the project manager for the Cummins Highway reconstruction project.
Kat Eschel.
Good evening, everyone. Kat Eschel in the City of Boston's Environment Department, and I work on the Air Pollution Control Commission, among various and sundry other things. It's good to be here tonight.
And then Tao.
Hi, everyone. My name is Lynn. I recently started working at the Air Pollution Control Commission as an air quality program assistant.
Thank you for joining us. So I just wanted to share some meeting goals for today. First, we wanted to share the ways that the city of Boston is working to improve air quality within the city. So today we'll learn a little bit of what is the Boston Air Pollution Control Commission and what we do, and what is the connection between transportation and air quality, and initiatives that apply to the residents to improve air quality in Boston. And then we'll also be discussing the Cummins Highway reconstruction and how it can participate in improving air quality long term. So what is a reconstruction? What does our timeline look like? And then we would like your input on the future of Cummins Highway reconstruction. So I'll pass it to Kat to tell us a little bit more about the Boston Air Quality Control Commission and the Environment Department.
Thank you. So the Air Pollution Control Commission is an entity that sits in the Environment Department, and we do a couple of different activities, but all related to reviewing, permitting, and regulating activities that relate to air quality and noise. So this includes parking in the parking freeze areas. So those are programs in effect in downtown, South Boston, and East Boston, but also permit as sort of enforcement related to idling in partnership with some other city agencies. We also review abrasive blasting and chemical cleaning permits for buildings. So if you had sort of painted brick on a building and you wanted to clean that off, and you might use chemical cleaning or abrasive blasting, it's that kind of permit because that can release some air pollution. And then the third kind of activity is sometimes things like open burning or smoke from industrial sites. And so some things that we do in Mattapan, we respond to noise and pollution complaints. We also respond to requests for putting up anti-idling signs. So if you have a location where you see somebody idle consistently, that's something where we have a form where you can request us to deploy an anti-idling sign. And we also have a community clean air grants program and provide information about zero emission vehicles. So just a couple of the different things that we do around the neighborhood. Next slide. More generally, so we're within the Environment Department. We're so green and environmentally friendly that our lights just turn off automatically. So sorry if I'm a little dark right now. The motion sensor does not know that I'm here. So in the Environment Department, it's a couple of different programs that work to enhance the quality of life in Boston. So we do that by protecting our air quality, our water, and some of our land resources. We also take action to address climate change. So Boston as a city is committed to reducing carbon pollution that contributes to climate change, and we're committed to preparing for the impacts of climate change. And so all of this is so that we're building a city that's more sustainable, that's resilient, and that's healthier for generations today, but also tomorrow. And so some of our main programs are Carbon-Free Boston, which is all the work that we're doing to reduce greenhouse gas emissions and air pollution that contribute to climate change. There's the initiative Climate Ready Boston. So that's all about preparing for extreme heat, sea level rise, and flooding. If you're at the previous conversation, you were talking to some members of my team who are on the Climate Ready Boston side about the heat resilience study. And our third major program is Zero Waste Boston. And that's all about increasing waste reduction and doing that reuse and recycling and composting so that we're sending less and less to incinerators that emit harmful air pollution and instead creating a more healthful economy.
All right. Hello, everyone. So to talk about Cummins Highway just a little bit, to give you an update on what's going on and what you're actually seeing right now, is actually a temporary redesign to slow speeding drivers and improve safety for all users while we work on the design of the Cummins Highway reconstruction, not only with the community, but with other interagencies within the city of Boston. If you want any more information, we ask that you please visit the boston.gov Cummins-Highway website for more information about the safety data that's currently available, as well as the comments that we have collecting to inform this project since the beginning. So to talk about why we want to reconstruct Cummins Highway. Cummins Highway has been updated since the spring of 1955. At that time, streetcars ran along Cummins Highway, and they were removed in 1953 to make room for cars. The current street layout that you actually see on Cummins Highway reflects the priorities of the 1950s, which enabled non-residents to drive quickly through neighborhoods if they're coming from the suburbs to get into downtown. A route like Cummins Highway was a priority, which is why they wanted to maintain the 4 lanes of travel. Next slide, please. So during a reconstruction project and what we plan or hoping to do on Cummins Highway, we plan to completely rebuild the street, including the sidewalks, the curbs, the street lights, traffic signals, the roadway pavement. And we also plan on, and what's actually happening right now is National Grid is replacing and updating the utilities along Cummins Highway. Boston Water and Sewer Commission have already completed their work, I believe maybe a few years ago. So we're currently just waiting on National Grid to finish. As soon as they get out there, I know that'll make everyone happy. But the city, we have budgeted approximately $12 million for the Cummins Highway reconstruction project, which we have not yet started spending yet. We're still working on community engagement and design, but that's the money that we haven't ready and budgeted and invested for this neighborhood in this project. So in regards to the Cummins Highway reconstruction project, we are not producing a design without your input. We're out here speaking to the residents because we want your help to help us shape how Cummins Highway should be for the next 70 years. We're currently doing community outreach to inform on the final design. And as I've mentioned, we have not begun any engineering work to design the corridor or spent any construction funds, which is that $12 million that I mentioned. So when we look at the opportunities and what we can do on Cummins Highway, one of the initiatives that the city has looked at is Go Boston 2030. One of the goals of that initiative, ultimately for the Cummins Highway project, is to improve safety on our streets, is to reduce emissions, and also invest in communities to achieve equity and access to opportunities. So part of that is partnering with the city departments to advance our collective plans. As I mentioned, we are working with our city agencies in regards to the Cummins Highway project, and we also work together so that we're hearing what the residents and the neighbors are saying and the community is saying to these other groups, whether it be the BPDA, whether it be BTD, we are working together to inform residents of the work that's happening around the city and also to improve collaboration in our work and achieve neighborhood and citywide goals. Lastly, as I mentioned, our collaboration with residents to advance our goals. We want residents to be aware, and we want residents to participate in the efforts that they care about, and also to confirm your vision for the future through our projects. So to give you a quick review of the timeline for the Cummins Highway project, this project actually began back in 2019. Well, the end of 2018, but our first community meeting was in April of 2019, We had 2 subsequent community meetings. But this was back when we were actually meeting in person at the Mattapan Community Center. We had one in October 29th of 2019. And then the last in-person meeting that we had regarding the Cummins Highway project was in February 27th of 2020. We did have a couple of pop-ups, I believe in October of 2020. But we did have, but just to show, but as you can see, the trials that we proposed, that we implemented on Cummins Highway began on July, and the second phase of the trial began in October of 2020. And so where we at right now is from June 2021 to ongoing is we're looking at continuing our engagement for the design of Cummins Highway. We have a number of engagement opportunities lined up. Back in June, we had a special tea talk with the rest of mobility with Mattapan Food and Fitness, where we talked to Charles Brown in July. Of course, we had the urban and heat resilience meeting that we had last week, a couple of weeks ago. Today, air quality, we want to discuss air quality, but in September, in August, and October, we have these listed: land use, lighting, green infrastructure, public health. Those are the meetings that we have scheduled for the future. And we're hoping that you guys can kind of come out and we can kind of continue this conversation. After we kind of sit down and discuss, we hope that we can kind of move into design for the Cummins Highway Reconstruction project.
Okay, so now we're gonna just set the scene with a little bit more about air pollution in Boston and just a little bit of background just to set the scene for this conversation. So next slide, please. So the first thing to know about air pollution is that not everybody is equally affected. So the county where we live in, Suffolk County, is the most polluted county in Massachusetts. And a lot of that comes from on-road vehicles, so cars and trucks that are driving on streets. And so we're getting a lot of that pollution in the Boston area. It's 88% above what everybody else in the state experiences. Trying to turn my lights back on. No such luck. So in terms of who is exposed to air pollution, so the people who are the most affected by air pollution are children, older adults, people with pre-existing health conditions. So that could be asthma or a chronic sort of lung condition. It's also low-income communities and communities of color. They're the ones who are at higher risk for health impacts associated with living near busy highways or busy streets and other sites where pollution is being emitted from multiple sources. In Massachusetts, in our urban areas, air pollution is disproportionately burdening those communities, including those low-income communities. And in terms of that health effect and how we see it affecting us today, there was a report in 2018 that ranked Boston 4th nationally for asthma prevalence. So we have really high asthma rates in Boston, at about 10% for adults and nearly 13% for children. And the map on the right that you see shows the rates of adult asthma. So the darkest color, those are higher rates, and then you have medium and then lower rates. And you can sort of see that Mattapan and other areas that are along Blue Hill Avenue have disproportionately higher rates of asthma. So next slide. All right. In terms of where this pollution is coming from, and what it's causing, traffic not only contributes to air pollution, but it also contributes to global climate change. And so when we look at where our emissions come from transportation, about 65% of it is coming from passenger vehicles. So that's cars and vans, people riding in their SUVs, and doing school pickup and drop off and going to work. So those are private household vehicles. The rest of it, you have some that comes from taxis or ride hail. You have trucks, so the freight industry. So, getting food to grocery stores and doing deliveries, that accounts for about 10–15%. And then everything that we consider to be public transportation, that's another 10–15%. So all of our buses and our T system and ferries, those are sort of that remaining 15%. But the bulk of it is coming from passenger vehicles, so cars and SUVs. Next slide. In terms of how much the average passenger vehicle emits, it's about 4.6 metric tons of carbon dioxide per year. And so what this visual is telling you is sort of just telling you in picture what that amount of gas looks like. It's a lot. And so that's how much the average car is emitting per year. Just think of a bunch of carbon dioxide, this invisible gas concentrated into a box, and it's about equivalent to what a household would emit. So it's a lot of pollution, and that's each car. In terms of what that pollution causes on the ground, the exhaust that's coming from motor vehicles contributes to forming a lot of different pollutants. So when we burn fossil fuels in vehicles, you're combusting a flame. And in that flame, not all of that actually gets consumed. Instead, it's an incomplete combustion is what they call it in chemistry class, if y'all remember that from high school. So it's an incomplete combustion. So there's a lot of extra gases that still come out of the equation on the other side. And so one of those is ozone. There's also nitrogen dioxide, as well as other things like carbon monoxide, particulate matter, volatile organic compounds, black carbon, and more. And a lot of these different pollutants have slightly different effects on our bodies. A lot of them are really bad for our respiratory system. So if you think about your throat and your lungs, so they can reduce your lung function, they can cause asthma, they can also cause things like lung cancer. Some of them can also make heart disease a lot worse and cause cardiovascular disease. So they all have slightly different effects, but it all contributes to some really negative outcomes for our bodies. So the exhaust that's coming out of your tailpipe, that's also just one part of the pollution. The other part of pollution that comes from vehicle traffic, it also comes from just the mechanics of our cars rolling down the street. So when they're rolling, the tires are getting worn, the brakes are getting worn, and you're also doing a little bit of abrasion on the road. And so all of that's contributing a lot of particulate matter pollution. And when you think of smog in cities, a lot of that is particulate matter. And so a lot of it, so you have all these different gases. For particulate matter, nearly all of it comes from just that action of the tire rolling down the road at whatever speed they're rolling at. In terms of the effects, so as I was saying, if you're being exposed to high levels of particulate matter, that can make lung and heart ailments worse. It can cause asthma attacks, lung cancer, and it means that we have a lot more people getting sent to the hospital. And we also see people die, increased mortality levels because of air pollution. Ozone, same thing. It can cause respiratory issues. It can also cause a lot of nasty lung diseases like asthma, emphysema, bronchitis. I know my mom gets bronchitis pretty much every winter. I'm sure you know somebody in your life that has asthma. And then in terms of what that causes in terms of premature deaths, air pollution nationwide is causing more than 2,200 premature deaths every year, and just in our urban areas. So it is shortening lives today. What you see on the photo here on the right is a photo from not the wildfires that were just affecting our air quality yesterday, but from a few years ago, there were some wildfires in Quebec, and that caused some really bad air quality here in Boston. So that photo is from Boston, not Blade Runner. That's what we're already seeing today. So traffic pollution, wildfires, it's all mixing together and shortening lives. Next slide, please. And so in terms of what that inequitable exposure looks like, all communities of color are not the same. There are some communities that are more heavily affected. And so especially in the Massachusetts area, Asian Americans are 36% more exposed than white residents. Chinatown has some of the worst air quality in the nation, so not too far from Mattapan. African Americans are exposed 34% more than white residents. And so if you remember that asthma map that I showed, that showed a lot of folks living along the Blue Hill Avenue corridor. So that's where a lot of that exposure might happen in Boston. And then Latinos are exposed 26% more than white residents. And so we're just seeing here that white residents on average are exposed far less than our communities of color. And so we can't just be blind to who is being affected. Next slide, please. So in terms of how this interacts with a street like Cummins Highway, so as Jeffrey put it earlier, Cummins Highway is an arterial road. It was all about helping non-residents get from outside of Boston to Boston's downtown. And arterial streets can actually cause similar levels of noise and air pollution to a major freeway. And sometimes those levels can be even bigger because generally in Boston, we don't have too many places where you have people's homes right next to a freeway, but on Cummins Highway, people's homes are right next to this road that has a lot of vehicle traffic. And so arterials can sometimes have even higher levels of pollution than a freeway. And so a lot of this happens when people are driving. And so people drive most in the morning during rush hour. And so in the Boston area, we tend to have calmer winds in the morning and then they get bigger in the afternoon. And so when you have both rush hour and calm winds, you can have some really high concentrations of air pollution that happen during morning rush hour. And so our goal here would be to ensure that this reconstruction project includes design elements that are going to help us to improve our air quality. So next slide, please. So let's talk a little bit about how street design and air quality can interact. Next slide. So there are a couple of different things that can have an effect on air quality just in our physical streets and how we design them. So there is some research out there that suggests that if we lower the speeds, the research indicates that either it has a negligible impact, so that means really not much of an impact at all, or even a slight improvement, so that if you're lowering your speeds, you might actually be slightly improving the air quality in the area. The other major way that we can improve air quality is also by expanding active transportation. So having high quality sidewalks as well as bike lanes, that means that people are going to feel more comfortable if you're doing a short trip, not taking a car, walking or riding a bicycle instead. And so having lower speeds, it makes it easier for people to walk and bike more. And that's a great way to improve air quality, is just to have that car trip not take place in the first place and to choose another mode. It has to be said that the biggest benefit of lower speeds is that it reduces the risk of collisions and traffic fatalities. There is some evidence that suggests that it can benefit air quality. This is an area where there actually isn't a lot of really good research out there, especially not in Massachusetts or Boston, into the link between speed and air quality. And so this is actually a place where there needs to be more monitoring and research to better understand how different design choices can affect air quality. And so one thing that we would love to talk to you about tonight is we're actually exploring, well, what if we did put out some air quality sensors to better understand how the design choices that we make together might improve our air quality over time, and just understand over time, what does air pollution look like on Cummins Highway? Next slide, please. There are some mitigation strategies that can reduce that traffic pollution. So those can be some of the things that we talk about. Two of them are roadside vegetation and noise barriers. So both of those can be really effective at reducing downwind pollution concentration. So if you have the wind going this way, but you have something like a tree blocking it in the middle or a barrier, you're going to stop a lot of that pollution from being able to get over to somebody's home on the other side. And so those can be really effective to help absorb and mitigate some of that impact. So especially if you have a thicker barrier, or you have a tree and some shrubs, and you have a healthy canopy, that can really help to reduce the amount of pollution that gets into a neighborhood. There's also a lot of really good evidence in healthcare policy, health research, that indicates that if you expand active transportation, you're also going to help close other gaps in health inequities. So just having that active mode and encouraging people to walk and bicycle can also help, in addition to reducing air pollution. All right. So in terms of what is contributing a lot of this pollution, I'd already said that 65% of our transportation emissions come from cars and SUVs. Not all types of vehicles emit the same amount, right? So what the data tells us is that pretty much anything emits less than if you're driving alone. So walking, biking, riding transit, or carpooling, all of those emit much less than driving alone. The other thing to think about is that electric vehicles, which are a great solution to reduce the amount of emissions, tailpipe emissions from a car, they don't eliminate emissions. And that's because of the tire wear, brake wear, and road abrasion that I talked about before. So they'll get rid of the tailpipe emissions, but you'll still get a lot of particulate matter, which is that form of pollution that can really affect your lungs. And so electrifying our vehicles isn't a silver bullet. We can't just electrify vehicles and forget about the problem, because the cars will still be rolling down the street and still causing pollution. The other thing to think about is about how big these different modes are. So if you're riding a bus or a train, 25 people riding in a train car emits about a third as much as 25 people driving alone. So even if the bus might be running on diesel or the train might be running on diesel, they're still emitting a lot less than 25 people driving alone, especially if they might be in an SUV. So some food for thought there. Next slide, please. Perfect. So just some other pieces of the pie, some other things that are changing how emissive, how much pollution cars are putting out. The United States Department of Transportation has been setting fuel economy standards for cars and trucks since 1975. And so these are known as the CAFE standards. And so the idea here is that you're reducing energy consumption and emissions by increasing fuel economy. So making sure that you can get more miles per gallon, essentially. And so over time, the average fuel economy of vehicles registered in Boston has improved. But the other piece is that people are driving more. Boston has been growing a lot. There are a lot of people, there's a lot of jobs, a lot of activity, and people want to drive to the jobs and go about their lives. And so while we're seeing our mileage get better, we're also seeing vehicle miles traveled increase. And so that actually means that over time, our transportation emissions have not decreased. And so that's since we started measuring them every year in 2005. And so there's something else is going to need to change if we're going to be able to reduce our transportation emissions. We can't just rely on fuel economies getting better. Next slide. So I'm going to go through a couple of different initiatives that are working to improve air quality, both in Boston, but also in Massachusetts. Next slide. So in Boston, zero emission vehicles are part of the puzzle. So that can include things like electric vehicles, also things like electric bicycles. And so our initiative is called Recharge Boston. And so that webpage has a lot of information with things like how-to guides, information about state or federal incentives and grants that you can get. And we're also working to deploy public EV charging stations across the city of Boston. So we are actually currently constructing a charging station in our municipal lot over on River Street. So pretty close to this corridor. And for context, charging at a municipal lot is about 25 cents per kilowatt hour. So that would be about $7.50 for a 100-mile charge on a 2020 Chevy Bolt. So $7.50 to be able to go pretty darn far. And so I did want to reiterate that EVs are great for reducing urban air pollution, but they don't completely eliminate it. And that's because of that road abrasion, tire wear, and brake wear. So those are still contributing to those non-tailpipe traffic emissions and still contributing to bad health effects. And so not only do we need to electrify, but we also just need to be shifting from driving alone, single occupancy vehicles, to sharing our vehicles and taking active modes as much as possible. So it's a both and. Next slide, please. So on the left here, you have an example of what an electric vehicle charging station looks like. We have a couple already deployed. And so the one in Mattapan on River Street is one of the next ones that's due to be completed very soon, we hope. One of the other things that we've done as a city is adopt a new policy for new developments. So large buildings going under construction and any building in the parking freeze that wants to deploy new parking has to make sure that 25% of spaces are EV installed, where an EV could drive in today and be able to charge their vehicle. And the remainder has to be EV ready, so that buildings are ready for a world where we're transitioning fully away from gas and diesel vehicles, and we're just 100% electrified. And so that policy has been in place for a couple of years. And we've had a lot of new developments already starting to comply with that. Next slide. Some other initiatives that are happening at the state level. So Massachusetts was part of the Volkswagen Settlement Fund. So Volkswagen sold about 14,000 cars in Massachusetts that were designed to cheat on emissions tests, and were actually emitting way more pollution than they said they were. And so Massachusetts sued along with a bunch of other states, and we received $75 million to reduce pollution, as well as to support the electrification of our transportation. So there's a couple of different programs. So the Mass EVIP, the Electric Vehicle Incentive Program, provides grants for public entities and grants for installing charging infrastructure at apartment complexes, workplaces, and more. So you don't have to be a city government in order to benefit from that. Your condo building might be able to benefit from that. There's also a program called More EV. And so that's all about providing consumer rebates. So whereas the other program was grants, this is rebates upon proof of purchase of an electric vehicle. So it's up to $2,500 for a battery electric vehicle and up to $1,500 for a hybrid vehicle. The third program that's funded through this is DERA, Diesel Emissions Reduction Act, which funds, they do a couple of different grant initiatives, but generally working to improve air quality by reducing diesel emissions. Next slide. In Boston, we also have our own ordinance around diesel emissions. So the Diesel Emissions Reduction Ordinance. And so under this ordinance, the city of Boston only uses ultra low sulfur diesel for our sort of pickup trucks and construction equipment and some of our municipal trash vehicles. And so that means that there's very little sulfur in there. Sulfur causes sulfur dioxide, one of those other air pollutants that we don't like very much. And that also, along with lead, was contributing to acid rain and rainforests. So we only use ultra low sulfur, no sulfur for us, thank you. We're also working to have all of our vehicles comply with post-2007 EPA standards. The Environmental Protection Agency set sort of higher standards for diesel vehicles after 2007. And so even if we have an older vehicle, we've been working to retrofit them so that they have scrubbers that can scrub out all the pollution from tailpipe exhaust as much as possible. We're also working to transition our Boston Public Schools school bus fleet away from diesel. We've already transitioned about half of our fleet to propane. And so propane buses emit far less pollution than your typical diesel school bus. So making sure that our kids are also going to be riding on cleaner buses. Next slide, please. On the flip side, we've been talking a lot about cars. Pollution also exists in our homes. The Boston Public Health Commission has a program called Breathe Easy at Home, where doctors can refer residents with asthma for a home inspection. There's a lot of things that can cause asthma in your in your home, things like mold, dampness, water leaks. It could be pest infestations, leaks, drafty doors and windows, and bad heating or ventilation, or as well as damaged carpeting. All of that can contribute to asthma in addition to traffic pollution. So not only can a doctor refer a patient, but if you have asthma and you think that there might be something in your home that it might be causing that, you can actually self-refer yourself to the program. So you don't even have to go to the doctor. But to do that, you can call the Breathe Easy coordinator at the Public Health Commission at the number on the screen, or you can email asthma@bphc.org. And so the way that works is Boston Inspectional Services Department goes to the apartment, visits it, and then landlords will have between 24 hours to 30 days to correct whatever issue was identified in the inspection. And so that's under the sanitary code. If they find a violation, the landlord is required to take action or to address whatever issue may be happening. Next slide, please. Another program that's newer, we're through the Air Pollution Control Commission, we've created a new community clean air grant program. The idea is funding and bringing visibility to community projects to reduce air pollution and reduce carbon emissions. And so the grants are available for up to $50,000 per grant. We have $350,000 allocated for this first year. And the idea is that we want to have conversations with people, hear what ideas people have to reduce pollution in the neighborhoods or improve local air quality in other ways. And so we're hoping to make this just an annual grant program that's always available for community partners to be able to continue to do the good work that they do in communities and work to improve our air quality. Next slide, please. Oh, I already shared a lot of this, but so we have $350,000 available this year, up to $50,000 per grant, and nonprofits, businesses, or individuals can all submit applications. Those applications are available in multiple languages and can be submitted and reviewed with feedback provided in language, so that even if somebody doesn't speak English, they still have access to this grant resource. Next slide, please. Okay. Turn it over to Daniela.
Yeah, sorry, there's some cleaning happening at the same time, but we also wanted to let you know that the Fairmont line is one of the ways that people can sort of get around and reach like downtown Boston and other areas of the city. So currently they're running a pilot program, and so the trains are running more frequently on weekdays every 45 minutes. And the last train leaves from South Station at 11 p.m. And you can actually use your trolley card. You can tap on the platform. There's a validator that should give you a receipt, and you can show that on board to show that you'll be using it, so you no longer need to have a different system in which you pay for the train. And it costs the same as the subway. It's $2.40 each way. And any rider that uses a trolley card, just like in any other system, can transfer for free within 2 hours of that first tab to the Red Line or any other subway lines or the Silver Line at South Station or any local bus that you need to. Sorry, and I forgot to mention, if you didn't know, there's a Blue Hill Ave station very near Cummins Highway, which is an entrance there, as well as on Blue Hill Ave. And then there's other buses nearby. I know that a lot of these buses were affected by the pandemic service levels reduction. So we just wanted to provide an update as well that all the buses that are traveling on Blue Hill Ave, as well as on Cummins Highway, are back to pre-pandemic levels. Most of them are running at 100% or even better than they were before COVID, from what I've heard. But also some of them are lagging. It's because the MBTAs actually didn't have enough operators, so they're currently training new operators to be able to take these buses and get to 100% in a more consistent basis.
A little bit about monitoring, since we mentioned that we were exploring putting in air quality sensors. Just wanted to share a little bit more about how that works. So obviously, while some scientific evidence suggests that lower speeds can support active transportation and can benefit air quality, there does need to be more data monitoring and research to understand the relationship between roadway design and air quality. And so what's great is that air quality sensors are increasingly becoming more and more available and low cost. And so there are a lot of different kinds of sensors that measure different things. So there are things like optical sensors, which can measure particulate matter. So an example of that are purple air sensors, which they actually create an online map where you can just see the sensor data, that if somebody has a purple air sensor and is willing to list it for free, that's just publicly available. So I actually pulled up one of the sensors that was a couple of the sensors in the area near Mattapan. And you can sort of see yesterday that there was a big spike related to the wildfire smoke that we've been getting from the West Coast. But then it can also show sort of those daily peaks and valleys, days where we have better air quality, days where we don't have as good air quality. There's also even some indoor air quality sensors, but so yeah, purple air is just one type of an inexpensive particulate matter sensor. There's other kinds of sensors that can measure different kinds of pollutants. So nitrogen dioxide, sulfur dioxide, ozone, nitric oxide, or carbon monoxide, all of those can be measured by electrochemical sensors, where there's actually like a small little chemical reaction happening in the sensor itself in order to be able to detect how much of a pollutant is in the air that's going through the sensor. And then there's also sensors called photoionization detectors that can measure volatile organic chemicals. And so different sensors, depending on how many gases they try to measure, they can be more or less reliable, particularly the electrochemical sensors. Sometimes they're not as reliable. There might be a wider gap in sort of the confidence that you can have in a measurement, a bigger level of uncertainty. They can also get very expensive. The more gases you try to measure, the more expensive they become. But there's been a pretty this cool revolution essentially happening in air quality monitoring where particularly for particulate matter, they've just gotten really good and pretty reliable for far less money. A purple air sensor is about $250, for example, whereas a full air quality monitoring station that the Environmental Protection Agency might put in place, like that could be $15,000 per station. So there's a lot of work being done to democratize air quality data. Next slide.
Thank you, Kat. That was a lot of good information, I think. We sort of wanted to provide this background information to sort of then hear your input on the future of Cummins and how we should be incorporating and thinking about air quality as we think of this redesign of Cummins Highway, which, as mentioned, is going to be, once we place it, the last time Cummins was touched and changed significantly was in the 1950s. And if we do it, soon, it's going to be another 70 years at this rate. So we want to make sure that we're thinking about all these different components that not only is the city working on, but also that residents are interested in, not only for the people that are there now, but for the people that are going to be living in our city in the future as well. So this is not the only conversation about the redesign of Cummins Highway. This is a continued series in which we focus on certain topics, and you can give us your input. And through these discussions, which are sort of in this informal way, will inform the design of Cummins and the engineering. And anything that you also share with other departments, such as the PPDA or the Environment Department, or any other conversations, we are in communication with everyone, and that would also get to us and inform the work. So I just wanted to recap briefly what we've been doing. In June, as Jeff mentioned, we hosted a special edition of Tea Talks, which is Transportation Talks, which is led by Mattapan Food and Fitness, the Outdoors, I forget their name currently, and the lens of powerful pathways. And we hosted Charles T. Brown to discuss the ways in the mobility of Black Americans is limited in the US through police, policies, and policy. So we hosted 2 of those talks if you weren't able, if you were able to make it there. And then 2 weeks ago, we talked about heat resilience with the Environment Department and how that relates to street design, as well as how we can apply some thoughts of that on Cummins. And in that conversation, we heard from you that we should be looking to add shade to the street for redesign, and that you were also concerned about the temporary redesign that's happening currently and its impact on emergency services and traffic. And since then, we've been in communication with fire and police about this topic. So now we sort of wanted to focus this input on sort of how this new design can work on pollution and helping air quality improve. So I posed some questions here, but this is also a discussion, so you can unmute to talk or raise hand. Thank you. I just wanted to briefly list out these questions before, in case anybody can't see the screen. So the questions that are on the screen currently is, where does air feel most polluted along Cummins Highway? Just so that we can make sure to take a look at that. And then, as Kat mentioned, we are exploring the possibility of air monitoring sensors. So where would measuring air quality along Cummins Highway make sense? And how, how would you like to share this data, and how would we use it moving forward, not only this, but in other projects? And where is along Cummins Highway is more important to you that we add green vegetation to provide pollution barriers. There was another option which Kat mentioned, which was these walls, but I can't imagine many people would want to isolate completely from the road, considering there's driveways and stuff. Anyway, I will search for anyone who has their hand raised and how to stay engaged with us. So perfectly tied into Kat's, if you don't have access to the Wi-Fi or internet, or if you just want a place to work and learn, Boston Public Libraries is hosting free Wi-Fi zones pop-ups around the city. There's one nearby at the Mattapan Library. The address is 1350 Blue Hill Ave. I don't know why I said it that way. Anyway, so there's 24 hours, there's lighting, there's shade, there's eating available for you to be outside, not inside the library. And then on Tuesdays and Thursdays, between 9 and 11, they will be providing nutritious breakfast and lunch at no cost for youth. And then on Tuesdays, there's also office hours for the rental relief fund at the same location. And these will be ongoing until October, I believe, or November. And then, okay, next, thank you. What else is happening nearby? There's the Leaf Yard waste drop-off on August 1st at American Legion, 500 American Legion Highway between 10 and 2. So it's a perfect spot to drop off your yard waste from this summer gardening, if you're doing any. There's also household and hazard waste drop-off on August 14th. 244 Mount Vernon Street, the UMass Boston Bayside lot in Dorchester. And this is the kind of waste that you can't throw in your, or you shouldn't be throwing on your garbage out to the curb. 2 weeks ago, we had a meeting with heat resilience, the folks that are doing, Zoe, who's doing the heat resilience study. We mentioned there that there was a second open house that was taking place. So it took place on July 14th, but you can still connect with them on their website. And Mattapan is one of the neighborhoods which is being the focus for this heat resilience study. And then a way to keep cool in the summer, in the heat, we have a map and locations list for where there's pools and tot sprays nearby. So we'll make sure to drop all those links in there. Then we talked to the folks at Parks, and you might have known that the walk-in playground is under construction. It started in June. There's a few delays because June was very wet. Seems like July might also be wet, but they're progressing through demolition and utility work. And if you have any if you have any questions, you can contact Lauren Bryant, her contact info, and I will drop the information and the website for this park on the links right after I'm done. Next. What else is happening? You can see me at the Mattapan on Wheels on Saturday, 8 a.m. sharp. We'll be at Ryan's Playground. This is a great event hosted by Mattapan Food and Fitness and their vigorous youth. Registration is required, and there'll be 3 different rides to do around the city, but also they'll be heading to Quincy, I believe. And the city of Boston, Boston Bikes provides bikes and helmets. So if you don't have one, we can get you one so you can ride. There's also beginning friendly bike rides on the Neponset River Way at the Mattapan Tea Stop. They depart every Monday night at 5:30. And that way you get to explore the Neponset River Greenway and meet some of your neighbors. And then that bike lady is also doing Tuesday tune-ups. It's every other Tuesday, 5:30 to 7:30. The person was yesterday at the Mattapan Library, which I just mentioned also has a fun Wi-Fi drop by or pop up. And then the next one is August 3rd at Almond Park. Next. And if you don't know how to learn how to ride a bike, we also have a Women's Learn to Ride program. We had our first class this summer. Last year we couldn't do it because of COVID. But last week we had our first one at the Mattapan Elementary School parking lot. And then our next one is next week, July 28th at the Mattapan again. The class is already full, but you can always sign up for the waiting list in case somebody drops, and we can contact you to come. So this will be around Boston. This year we'll be doing them in Roxbury and East Boston and Mattapan. And then we'll also in September have some street skills at the Boston Water and Sewer parking lots, and then we'll ride on the streets, which is in North Roxbury. And then just wanted to make sure you have our contact information and a way to stay in touch with us. The next Air Pollution Control Commission hearing is on August 11th at 1 p.m. And then you can always visit the website of the Environment Department, boston.gov/department/environment. And then their contact, I will drop this in the chat, but I can also say it's apcc@boston.gov. And they can always give a call as well at 617-635-3850. And you can always contact Kat Eschel at Catherine.Eschel@boston.gov. And then for the Cummins Highway reconstruction, our next meeting is on July 17th. We'll be talking about land use and transportation planning with the folks at the Boston Planning and Development Agency. And you can register using bit.ly/Cummins-land. And then as we mentioned throughout the meeting, our project website is up to date. You can search like information about the data we've been gathering, what is happening in terms of the trial, any news information, and anything that's happening in terms of these meetings, the recordings, the notes that we take will all be on the website. You can also sign up for office hours in which you can talk one-on-one with us. You can meet with Jeff or with me or with other members of the project team. And you can sign up for those through bit.ly/Cummins-15. And then you can always reach out to Jeff Alexis at jeffrey.alexis@boston.gov. Okay. I know I threw a lot of information just talking, so I did drop all the links in the file, and you will get these links via email if you register for this meeting. So you can access them and sort of, and as well as this presentation in your own time, and it will be translated to Spanish and Haitian Creole as well. So, if anybody has any last thoughts before we conclude this meeting, speak now or email one of us. Thank you once again to everyone for coming, and we hope to see you in another meeting or out on the corridor and just chat more with you about the future of Cummins, but also all the other things that are happening around that the city is doing and how we can work together. So, good night. Let you all have dinner.
Thank you. Have a good night.
All right, everyone. Thank you so much. All right.